Okay, I think it's about time to begin. Come on in. I hope y'all have had a good week. Good to see you this morning. Did you ride your bike this week? Did you ride your bike this week? You didn't? Okay. All right. Oh, you did? Okay. We're in 1 Kings chapter 21. We'll finish Naboth's vineyard this morning, and then we'll continue with another prophet. I decided to go ahead and instead of skipping over the section after Naboth's vineyard, we'd go ahead and talk about the demise of Ahab, since he's been a central figure in our study. But anyway, we talked about this individual that had a generational property, a vineyard, and it was coveted by King Ahab. And the king went to him, at least he went to him, and offered him money or a different vineyard, something that would be comparable to what he had, because he really wanted that vineyard because it was next to his palace area. But Naboth refused to have any kind of agreement or to sell the property to the king, so the king got really upset. And he got upset in a ways that you don't normally see, I think, adults behave, but he started to pitch a fit and all sullen, and he laid on his bed when he got home and sulked about it. And finally, his wife came in and said, "What is wrong with you?" And so he told his wife, "Well, I tried to buy Naboth's vineyard and he won't sell it, and I really want it, and I don't know what to do." And you can just imagine how pathetic the whole scene was in real life. It's pathetic when you read it. But Jezebel says, "Well, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." And from all indications in the text, Ahab doesn't know what her plans are. And he doesn't inquire, "Well, how are you going to do it?" He just accepts the fact that she's going to take care of it. And by accepting that, what has Ahab done? He's condoned it, yeah. He's condoned it. He hasn't asked. He hasn't, from the basis of what Jezebel would offer as far as the plan, he didn't say, "Yeah, that sounds good, but babe, don't kill him." But he didn't do that. He doesn't know what's going on. And we'll see in a minute that our ignorance about things doesn't necessarily excuse us from being accountable about some things, right? And that's one of the lessons, I think, that emerges from the text in this event of Naboth's vineyard. So she goes and takes care of it. There's a planned feast where Naboth lives, a banquet of sorts, and they've gotten, all of his friends and neighbors come, but they have Jezebel has gotten some, characters to lie about him. She's probably, made deals with these individuals or pressured them, and as they are at the feast, they're going to make an accusation about Ahab that's false, just like they did Jesus. These worthless individuals, sons of Belial, worthless fellows. And as a result, an innocent man is killed. And after his death, it's told to Ahab by Jezebel that Naboth is dead, by the way. Now, I don't know how long of a period has transpired, but it is something that Ahab was very excited to hear. And that's kind of problematic too. He didn't inquire about how did he die, is the family taken care of, the vineyard's yours, go and take possession of it, it's yours. So this is where we're picking up. I want us to look beginning, verse 15 of 1 Kings 21. As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, "Arise, take possession of the vineyard and Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money, for Naboth is not alive but dead." And as soon as Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab arose to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreel to take possession of it. So God comes to his prophet Elijah. Says, "I want you to go meet Ahab at Naboth's vineyard." And so beginning in verse 20 says that Ahab said, verse 17. "And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go down to meet Ahab king of Israel, who is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone to take possession of it. And you shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, Have you killed and also taken possession? And you shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, and the place where the dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick your own blood." So that's what Ahab is going to encounter when Elijah approaches him at Naboth's vineyard. A few things before I comment on anything. Is anything kind of rise to the forefront that you notice from what we just read? Connie?
He's going to reap what he sowed.
Yeah, very true. This is an example of one's going to reap what they sow, for sure. What else? Anybody?
Well, they have referred to Elijah as his enemy.
Yeah, he's going to in just a moment. I like, it's interesting to me how the text states, "Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth." He's gone to take possession of it. And what do you suppose, or how would you describe Ahab when he's in the vineyard of Naboth?
He's probably excited.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he's, I don't know, maybe he's running between the vines. Yeah, touching things. This is mine. It's all mine. And I'm not sure how big the vineyard was, but it must have been very attractive since Ahab wanted it. And he's delighting in his new found, windfall that he's had because of the death of Naboth. Yes.
One thing I get out of this is that God sees all. He knows all.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew what was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
What was going to happen before it happened. He knew what.
Yeah. Be sure your sin will find you out. That's that's for sure. Now, he's in the vineyard enjoying himself, and the interesting thing that's left out is the inheritance of the vineyard should stay within his own family. That's the law. Under the covenant of God in the Old Testament, that the family generation.
The original owner.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
It should stay within the family, but it's not. And probably the reason she had strategized to have people accuse Naboth of certain things, being a traitor and all these things, was a way to circumvent any questions or any idea that that he's taking the whole thing from the family, and there's no accountability, and plus he has a leg to stand on because of what others have said about Naboth, and then the execution of Naboth. So it's interesting how he's sort of, or at least Jezebel has covered Ahab.
But you talk. He had to know what she'd done, because it's not the first evil thing she's done, and he's allowed it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the more you read about Ahab, the more I begin to wonder, did he really know? Because he's been reigning not as the king, but almost as a child in the kingdom, where Jezebel's been the real ruler. Everybody's scared of Jezebel. And
seems like he just happened to have it. He don't really care how he got it.
and this comes out.
There in the vineyard, he knows in the back of his mind what happened, but he he don't want to dwell on it, 'cause he got what he wanted.
He has received what he wanted. So if you were to look at Ahab and the kind of person that he is, I mean, this is not a pretty picture of a human being. It's all about what he wants, his desires, and there is nothing in the text that shows, yet there will be, that he's remorseful or that he's asking any questions. He doesn't know how it's happened. We're not told. I just assume that she's gone out and done this for him, and she's allowed it. He's allowed it. But when God comes to the prophet, he says to the prophet that Ahab is going to be held accountable. Why is that? Why is Ahab held accountable for what Jezebel has done? So we already said one thing. He permitted it or allowed it. He knows the character of Jezebel, sure. He's the king, yes. Think about that. The king, yeah. The king is the arbitrator. He's like the chief justice. I mean, he's the one who is supposedly, should be the one that God has put in place to guide his people. That's why the king was referred to as God's son. Okay? And that becomes even more important in the New Testament when Jesus becomes God's son when he sits on the throne. Okay? Because it was a relationship in which the king was to do the bidding of God. He was the leader, the enforcer of God's ways. He adjudicated the most important, cases would come up to him, but he had that responsibility of leadership. Were you going to say something?
No, I'm just thinking. I feel like it's suspicious that these guys jump up and say Naboth cursed God and the king.
Yeah.
Because we know that neither Ahab nor Jezebel follow. They're not respecters of God anyways, because they raised up these Baals and these other prophets that they listen to and all these priests for this whole other religion.
Right.
And I don't understand why people just took that and they're like, oh yeah, he spoke.
Yeah. The people that lived around him. Certainly they knew Naboth, but they were, I think it's all about the fear of what Jezebel was going to do or would do to them if they didn't comply. So there's a lot of things that's undercurrent.
And how bad would it stink to have Ahab and Jezebel for neighbors? It might have been a little bit of a relief for him.
Yeah. I think I wouldn't mow my yard or the vineyard, just let the bug eat it. Connie?
I think being that he was a king, that he was an example
Yeah.
for all
He should
others.
be.
And therefore God had to make an example of him because, he was the example of others. You can't do these things
Yeah.
and get away with it.
Yeah. Well, that's what led Israel astray. There was no good king in North Israel. In Judah, there were some good kings, but there were also some bad kings. But all the kings in North Israel were horrible. Now, so he's in the vineyard. He's all happy. I mean, it's kind of like, payday, or the way we get when something happens, we get what we want. We're excited about it. So he's enjoying, canvassing the vineyard and all of this. And so God comes to Elijah and tells him that, I want you to go meet him. Notice what God said in verse 25. He says that he sold, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to verse 29. Ahab said to Elijah, that's when he met him, okay, have you found me, O my enemy? What was the previous characterization of Elijah in one of the earlier encounters? what did Ahab call him? Here it's, oh, you enemy, talking to the prophet. It was the troubler of Israel. And that's kind of interesting. But that's the irony. Tonight we're going to talk about, figures of speech, and one of them is irony. And the Bible's just, it's rich with irony. Because it's not that Elijah was the troubler of Israel. It was Ahab. He's the one that's bringing trouble to Israel. And here, it's not that Elijah is the enemy. Ahab is the enemy of his people and of God. But that's what he thinks of him. Now, I think, why would he call him my enemy? I think it's like Paul in the book of Galatians. Have I become your enemy because I what? Tell you the truth? Well, to some, you become their enemy. And this is a classic, I think, example of that very thing taking place. So, have you found me, O my enemy? Answered, and I have found you because you have sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. Interesting phrase here. You have sold yourself into doing what is evil. What does that mean? You have sold yourself.
Well, to me, when people do that, you just give up everything that you believe in, trying to do good, and then you just let it go because you want something so bad, craving it, you're coveting it so bad that you don't care how you do it and what you do, you get it.
Yeah. When you sell yourself over to something, you're relinquishing or giving up what? Yeah, your soul. Let's make it more specific. Okay? You're giving up your freedom, but you're giving up what else? Okay? Giving up your possessions. Eventually. What about the character of the individual? Any morals that he had, any conscience that lingered, to sell himself was to relinquish those things, to surrender that.
All that was good.
All that was good, yeah. Sold, that's what we mean. You sold yourself to the devil. You've relinquished your identity that you previously had. If there was any kind of inkling of moral character or goodness or anything like that, it's gone. You have become slaves to another individual. I think this is what Paul is talking about when he emphasizes in Romans and other places about being slaves to righteousness. We should sell ourselves not to do evil, but become slaves to what? Righteousness, those things. So there's always that dual thing in the Apostle Paul, slaves of righteousness or slaves of sin, unrighteousness. But I find that statement very interesting, very telling. It's a figure of speech, by the way, right? You have sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. Behold, I will bring disaster upon you. I will utterly burn you up and will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free, in Israel. And notice who's speaking here? Elijah's speaking or mouthing, but who's speaking? It's God. Notice he's saying I. Elijah is standing as the mouthpiece of God and speaks in the first person, which is interesting in the relationship between a prophet and God. And I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah. For the anger to which you have provoked me, and because you have made Israel to sin. Think about this. It's another thing that comes up in the New Testament. He made Israel to sin. What does that mean? Can you make somebody sin? Manipulation, the environment, what's introduced. Yeah. In other words, through the deception, through the error, through the idolatry, he has provided the opportunity, the whereabouts for people to sin. And they gladly did it. Now, I know there's personal responsibility, right? But notice that Ahab is held accountable for providing the atmosphere of it. Providing the atmosphere, or the opportunity, or the means to. Any comments about that? It's just, it's telling to me how, what God says in regard to the accountability of Ahab being the king, the leader, the husband, you know, all of these things which he has been or should be. He is providing the mechanism, the environment, the opportunity for people to sin. Yes.
Reminds me of the saying, be careful the company you keep. Because this, you know, the things he's doing and everything, the people that surround him, that support him and everything, he's like, he's opening the door for him to sin. I think that's where the part of this causing Israel to sin.
Yeah, he's opened the door
Yeah.
to things that the door was shut, you know. Yes.
And at that time, did not the man, the husband in this instance, pay more so on the standards of their spouse? Or accountable maybe?
Well, I would say, I think generally that is true, even now, you know, in regard to male spiritual leadership in the church and in the home. But it's this is sad commentary. There is nothing that Ahab could say that would be a fair excuse that God would say, well, you know, I didn't think about that. Or, yeah, you got a point there. It wasn't all me. You know, you just think about the excuses that people might give for engaging in sin or engaging in anything. The prophet, God, is allowing none of that. Okay? And keeps it focused on the character of Ahab. Yes, Paul.
It's strange to think the comparison, a prophet talking to Ahab, who was a sinful person, and then Nathan talking to David, who supposedly was God's appointed, God's chosen. The reactions of the king when those prophets spoke to him, because, you know, it was Nathan that told the story, and David said he should be punished and everything.
He condemned himself, yeah.
It's you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's you sinned
You are the
inside
man.
the Lord.
Right.
And then Ahab doesn't, he's oblivious to it.
Yeah. So, you have God holding Ahab accountable. And we continue, it says, and I will make your house the house of Jeroboam. We already read that. Now, you see the anthropomorphism, the anger of God. Okay? It's not like God is flying off the handle. The anger of God is the reaction of God to sin. Okay? The wrath of God is the reaction of God to sin. It's not an emotion. It is the condemnation of sin. That's the anger of God against something. So when God punishes, he's not like flying off the handle and getting his lightning bolt and go, boom, like some of the, Greek gods and goddesses. God's reaction is based upon his identity, his character's virtue. And it is punishment against sin is described as the wrath and the anger of God. And so this is going to be the consequence. Okay, you're going to suffer the consequence of the sin because, as the Bible says, you've provoked God to anger. Now understand that they're attributing qualities of a human being to that of a spirit, God, in order to stress the point of sin's atrocity and what it does. So, let's see. So the anger to you have provoked me, and because you have made Israel to sin. And of Jezebel, the Lord also said, the dog shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dog shall eat. And anyone of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the heavens shall eat. That's not a. Notice the number of times about the dogs licking at the blood and eating the bones. So you had it in regard to Naboth, because that's happened. Turn around. It's going to happen to you. And not only that, but his entire lineage is going to be eliminated. So that's quite a punishment that the prophet is this an overreach of God? I mean, is God being too hard on the man? Why such a punishment? What in the recording of this, what are we to gain from the consequence of sin here? See, you have critics of the Bible who look at these things and say, God's just atrocious, we judge him based upon our own cultural understandings or fairness or kindness and things of this nature, and we don't approach things according to God's view of things, and we don't understand the magnitude of sin. And so in order to emphasize that, you have this punishment, this consequence that's going to come to Ahab and Jezebel. Now, Ahab, although he despised the prophets, now you remember at Mount Carmel in his Baal's defeat by Elijah, there was a moment of spiritual revival in the land, and Ahab seemed to be a part of that. And so as a result, Elijah ran in haste to Jezreel, hoping that these things would the revival will even hit Jezebel and all that. But then he had an awakening, a surprise reaction. Jezebel said, well, I'm going to kill you like you killed my prophets. And so it was unexpected, and he left his post, and he went down and found a cave to stay in where God met him. Okay? Well, we see all this happening, and the reaction of Elijah, the ups and downs here. But understand that there was a time when Ahab had a spiritual revival. So there's been a period of time that has taken place, and notice how quickly, things have gone back, not to normal Ahab, but have become even worse. Now, I want us to read verse 25. This is the response of Ahab to Elijah's words. This is a summary. I have this in parentheses. I don't know if your translation does. In verses 25 and 26 is sort of a parenthetic statement. It's a summary of Ahab in order for us as the reader to understand how bad things had become. and how bad Ahab was. So there was none who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord like Ahab. Would you like to have that epitaph on your tombstone? None like Ahab, who sold himself to do evil, whom Jezebel, his wife, incited. What does that mean? Encouraged. He was easily manipulated by evil. He acted very abominably in going after idols, as the Amorites had done, whom the Lord God cast out before the people of Israel. You know, when Israel always had a problem with idolatry, but when Israel went into the promised land and all of this, you know, the foreigners were to be kicked out, and there are idolatrous practices and all these things. And that was the standard, you know, actions of what God would direct the people to do. But Ahab, as we have noticed, is not a good person in regard to his character. Yes?
I'm reading the New American Standard, the 1995 version. It says, there was no one like Ahab who sold himself because
of idolatry.
Jezebel.
Cause of Jezebel, yeah.
It just reminds me of the sign that Paul used to have in his basement up there at the lake. It said, whether you end up with a goose egg or a nest egg depends on the chick you marry.
Okay.
But Ahab had free will.
Yes.
He had a choice, but he sold himself.
Yeah.
And his wife was very influential.
Very influential, yeah.
And it's unfortunate, you know, because we're fixing to see his response.
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And what God responds. So there was some sincerity.
Yeah.
There was some sincerity left, I feel like, in Ahab.
That's why I say it's kind of up and down with him. It's almost as if he gets caught up in things and doesn't realize how bad things are. He's not told by Jezebel, you know. There's probably a lot of things that have occurred he doesn't even know about that are atrocious that Jezebel has done or has allowed, killing the prophets, various things. But he's responsible. He's responsible.
It doesn't absolve
Exactly.
him of any guilt. He should have looked into it.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it doesn't absolve him of any guilt.
So this is what Dallas is referring to, beginning of verse 27, and I want to get your feedback on this. This might be a little troublesome to us. And when Ahab heard those words, he tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his flesh, and fasted and lay in sackcloth, and went about dejectedly. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, have you seen how Ahab has, what do you have? Humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days I will bring the disaster upon his house. All right, talk to me about this passage.
Gives me hope.
Okay. Well, for one thing, let me ask you this before we give into the hope of it. Does it bother you in any way?
Yes.
Okay, why?
Well, in a way, I mean, he's going to spare him, but he's going to make him watch his kids die, make him watch his family die. And that I don't know, for me, that would be about as bad or worse than going in and taking him. I mean, that's just.
Did it say that he was gonna be able to see? I thought.
Yeah, it didn't say that, but he
Bring
said
calamity.
he's going to bring calamity upon his children, so, you know, it's not going to happen during his lifetime.
Yeah, he's.
But the point, critics will point out that, you know, this seems unfair for a future generation for them to suffer the penalty of Ahab's sin. Well, what are they leaving out? What does God know that people don't know? You know, you can read about Ahab's children, and they're worse than he is. See, it's we sit in and accuse God of being unfairness and all this stuff, but you have to understand that God is, he knows, okay? But what is the point of this text in regard to Ahab and the punishment that was, given to him? I think it goes back to what Dallas says. It gives me hope. And in what way? Why?
Humility. The idea of humbling yourself before God and having a broken and contrite spirit.
Yeah.
And then I just find it interesting that it's the same terminology used about Naboth. His response to Naboth won't sell me this vineyard. He wanders around out.
Yeah.
Right?
About
But this has got to be something different.
Yeah.
In that he wanders around with a different attitude.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's the message of the prophet got to him. It scared him. And he came to realize, I think he was convicted. He came to realize.
I mean, if you saw the prophets get killed, I think it'd be very, and he tells you this,
Yeah.
I think it would be, you're not going to doubt it.
So, yeah. And, Ahab respected the prophets. I mean, what they said and everything. And later, when we get to Micaiah, what?
Does this mean he was forgiven, but he still had to have consequences for the sin that he?
Yeah, I think God granted forgiveness to him at this point. I mean, is it? And this is something else. Are not forgiveness and repentance are those not conditional things? In other words, if one repents, then doesn't that change the condition and where God responds and says he has humbled himself before me, and so I relent, okay, of the catastrophe to him, okay. So that's a sign of God recognizing there might be a change here. He's exhibiting, and I find that encouraging because, in a sense, I am so glad that if we humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord, James would say, what is it? It says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Yeah.
Brother Scott,
Go ahead.
what's the difference between forgiveness and mercy? Is this an exhibition of God forgiving sins of Ahab or showing him mercy, or are they synonymous?
That's a good question. What do y'all think? Is forgiveness and the showing, or is it compassion being shown? Are they the same thing? Is God showing compassion tantamount to him forgiving Ahab?
I'm gonna go back to Nathan. Even then, David was forgiven, but the child died.
The child died. Yeah.
And said the sword would not leave your
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
So there were still consequences for his sin, even though he was forgiven.
Yeah. The next episode, though, in Ahab's life, when he goes and fights against the Assyrians, he violates an instruction of God, and God says he's going to die, and he's killed in battle. So I would say, Dallas, that I see him as the same thing. He's forgiven of this sin up to this point, but later he reverts back to his old ways, and so he turns from God, and as a result, he didn't come back. He didn't repent, and so he suffered the fate of being killed in battle. That was predicted by the prophet, actually. So it almost bothers me. I know it. Grace is a little bit troubling. Compassion can be somewhat troubling when we know people all deserve to get what's coming to them. Right? I mean, the atrocity. And so I want Ahab to burn. I'm sure there would be a number of people, how could God have compassion on him at this time, being the kind of person he is?
Well, we're not God. God is above us.
Yes.
We don't, yeah, I believe in justice, but I want mercy too.
Yeah. There's going to be justice and consequence of sin. There's always consequences of sin. You don't wipe away the consequences, but you can be forgiven.
Yes, you can.
But one can also create other conditions and walk away from God where you're,
Don't that make you glad God to judge you and not man?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is something in the episode where we have a little ray of hope, it seems. This is another time in which there's a little ray of hope, just like what happened in Mount Carmel. It reminds me of the parable of the sower. You remember the different soils and how sometimes there's a springing up in faith, but then there's things that come, situations of life, the weeds and whatever, and it destroys the plant. And Ahab seems to be not the good soil, but he reverts back to his practices. But certainly, on these two occasions, he had the opportunity to grow in his faith with God and do what needed to be done, but he doesn't do it. Okay.
So you're saying that we can have both the Pharisee and the tax collector attitude. I'm glad I'm not like these
Yes,
people.
exactly.
And at the same time, a day later come back and be, have mercy on me. I'm saying that, I feel like this exhibits that.
Yeah.
Both sides of that same coin, the parable that Jesus told about the Pharisee that comes into the temple, we've gone over before, but Ahab has this attitude of, I'm not like these other people, I'm king.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden,
And I do what I
he
want.
realizes.
And he comes, yeah.
He's going to flip back.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming in the next couple of chapters. He's going to flip back and have that same.
But we have hope right now for him,
Right.
don't we?
Right.
Yeah, I think this is a good illustration of God's patience and mercy for those who humble themselves before him. And though we might desire certain things, consequences or whatever, this isn't fair. It reminds me of the parable that Jesus told about the workers, those who went out into the field all day long, and then midday go in the field, and then you got one an hour before, work is over, and they went out, and then they all got paid what? The same.
The prodigal son.
The prodigal son's another one. I mean, those things bother me. Well, the reason is we don't understand grace, mercy, and compassion. We're still, if we're not careful, hold an attitude that we might sell ourselves to, and it's not godly. So, yeah, I guess we better stop there. We can introduce chapter 22. I'll just kind of review it just quickly. There's a series of battles with Syria, and we're introduced to the council of prophets again, the school of prophets. There's evidently prophets in training, other than Elisha and Elijah and other named prophets that we've seen. But there's a council of them, and so the prophet is coming to Ahab, and also the southern king joins in helping the northern kingdom against the enemy. And they're told that they'd have great success, and they do. And then the prophet warns the king, well, you defeated them now, but they're going to, prepare yourself because they'll come back. Well, they do come back, and there is a statement the prophets have indicated, do not leave any one of them alive, the king either. Okay, well, Ahab defeats Syria, but he makes a covenant with the king that he's supposed to kill. For whatever reasons, practical, maybe this is thinking of, the Assyrians who are rising and becoming strong, maybe an alliance, with Syria might be better than wiping them out, maybe having some help. But whatever reason, he makes this covenant with them. And so the prophet says, no, you violated the will of God. And so he signed his death warrant, is basically what happens. So we'll get into that. And one of my favorite prophets besides Elisha and Elijah is Micaiah, who is also problematic for Ahab because he says, don't call on him because he always prophesies evil against me. All the other prophets prophesy good things for Ahab, build him up. And before they go into battle, Judah's king says, is there not another prophet around that we can ask besides these in North Israel? Yes, there's one, Micaiah. And Ahab says, don't ask him, man, he's always counter to everything I want to do. So that's a funny episode, and I want us to read that to show you that, people want to hear what they want to hear. They don't want to hear the truth, and that's sad. Okay, thanks.